The ink dried years ago, but it felt fresh as blood in her hands the day she realized promises could burn like paper. She stood silent, the courtroom air thick as battlefield smoke, watching him smirk from across the room, as if this war had already been won. He had built an empire on her quiet sacrifices, each late night, each whispered reassurance. Now he planned to leave her nothing but ashes. But beneath the silence, a storm brewed, in the smallest print, hidden among the pages he never bothered to read, lay her freedom, waiting like a loaded gun. She had been underestimated, dismissed, discarded, but today she would rise from the wreckage of betrayal. The time for peace had passed. The battlefield was set, and justice, she knew, had a way of returning fire. Celeste Warren watched the last sliver of daylight vanish through the broad windows of her suburban home, the one she had meticulously decorated for over a decade. IT. She stood in the kitchen, her fingertips grazing the cool marble countertops she had once selected with pride. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the oversized clock on the wall. Everything felt eerily still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Tonight, her husband Marcus had announced that he wanted a divorce. He'd done it abruptly, like commenting on the weather, offering no explanation beyond, "This marriage just doesn't work for me anymore." The numbness in her mind struggled to catch up with the brutality of his words. She recalled the moment he'd come home earlier that evening. He had breezed in, barely meeting her eyes, muttering about a meeting with key investors that had run late. His tone had been distant for months, but tonight it was ice cold. Celeste had once joked that she could measure the strain of his day by counting the creases on his forehead. This time, there had been no creases, only a hardened, resolute look as he pulled out a slim folder from his briefcase. Before she could ask what it was, he had dropped the bomb, a single statement that shattered 12 years of companionship, love, and compromise. "It's time we split," he had said, as if they were housemates deciding to move on amicably. Then he slid the folder over to her. It contained a prenuptial agreement Celeste had signed the week before their wedding, a document she had barely read at age 23, blinded by love and the naive belief that they'd grow old together. In those days, Marcus was only beginning his climb in the financial industry, and she was completing her graduate degree in architectural restoration. Their relationship had been a whirlwind of romance and ambition, each inspiring the other. She remembered the countless nights staying up to discuss big dreams for the future, the real estate empire Marcus wanted to build, the philanthropic causes Celeste hoped to champion once she made her mark in museum curation. Now, the folder in front of her was heavy with the weight of betrayal. She flipped to the last page, where she spotted her own youthful signature next to Marcus's. The text was dense, but the main clause was painfully clear: any assets Marcus acquired would remain solely his in the event of divorce, and she would depart with only personal belongings. Marcus had even spelled out that if there were a home, she'd have no claim beyond what was in her closet. For years, Celeste had quietly trusted her husband's word that everything was ours. The paper in her trembling hands proved otherwise. When she looked up to confront him, he was already heading upstairs, mentioning a dinner event he had to attend. The back of his suit jacket was a silent farewell, as though he was too busy to even wait for her reaction. Now the hollow silence pressed in from all sides, punctuated only by that ticking clock. Celeste's breath caught in her throat. Part of her wanted to scream, smash the neatly arranged glassware, call a lawyer immediately. Another part, the part that had seen her father walk away from her mother years ago, wanted simply to curl up and cry until dawn. She did neither. That night, sleep was impossible. Celeste spent hours pacing the room that still smelled faintly of Marcus's cologne. The decor was a testament to their shared life-framed vacation photos from Santorini, a shelf of architectural history books next to Marcus's impressive library of economics and finance publications. Everything looked so deceptively harmonious. Yet, all around her, she now perceived the outlines of a stage set about to be dismantled. At one point, she pulled out her phone to scroll through the countless photos capturing holiday gatherings, charitable events they had organized together, business dinners with potential investors. In so many of those pictures, she stood next to Marcus with a radiant smile hosting, organizing, forging connections that benefited him immeasurably. She remembered countless late nights editing his presentations, brainstorming ideas for his real estate pitches, and even rewriting sections of his proposals in her clear, methodical style. Marcus's success had partly grown from her invisible labor, from the stability and emotional support she offered, but the prenuptial agreement in that folder spoke a cruel truth. He had seen her as a convenient partner, not an equal, and if he truly planned to enforce it, she would walk away with nothing but the clothes she wore and a battered economy car that was already on its last legs. The blatant unfairness ignited a slow, simmering rage in her chest, one she had never allowed herself to feel before. For years, she had tolerated his condescending remarks about her soft skill set and her delayed career ambitions because she believed it was all part of a partnership, that she was contributing in other ways. She tried to quell her swirling thoughts by recalling how they had met in the first place at a university fundraiser, where she'd been part of the organizing committee. Marcus was magnetic. He had a spark in his eye, a razor-sharp wit, and a determination to conquer the world. Celeste was charmed by his drive, thinking they would become the ultimate power couple. She'd never imagined he might lock her out of the wealth and life they built together. As dawn broke, Celeste resolved not to let her life become collateral damage in Marcus's self-serving narrative. She opened her laptop and began searching for lawyers who specialized in complex high-net-worth divorces, scouring reviews and reputations. She knew Marcus he would expect her to be passive, to let him lead. He had always teased her for being too nice, the type to give more than she asked for in return. But now, she refused to be a victim of that kindness. By mid-morning, she had identified a firm that handled exactly these kinds of messy divorces involving hidden assets and controlling spouses. She scrolled through the list of senior partners until she saw one name with an impressive track record: Samantha Porter. According to the testimonials, Samantha had a reputation for winning major settlements for spouses who'd been overlooked or undervalued. Her nickname around the legal circuit was the Silent Storm, thanks to her calm demeanor that masked a fierce determination. That was exactly the kind of ally Celeste needed. Without hesitation, she dialed the office number. Part of her heart still trembled. She was about to turn the page on a life she had once cherished, a love she had thought was forever. But in the echoing silence of that house, Celeste felt a fresh surge of determination. If Marcus wanted a fight, she would give him one. Celeste scheduled a consultation with Samantha Porter for the following afternoon. Arriving at the downtown law office felt surreal. She'd never imagined herself crossing such a threshold. After all, she'd once believed her marriage was built on mutual respect and honest devotion. But here she was, with a neatly organized folder containing bank statements, property deeds, and what few financial documents she had managed to download from Marcus's computer over the years. The firm's reception area exuded modern sophistication, sleek furniture, warm recessed lighting, abstract art on the walls. No magazines scattered on the coffee table. Clearly, they didn't expect clients to wait long. True to that impression, a poised secretary ushered Celeste into Samantha's private office within minutes. The lawyer, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and hair pulled back into a low chignon, extended a welcoming hand and introduced herself in a calm, confident tone. Samantha's office was as organized as a museum exhibit color-coded binders, meticulously arranged law reference books, and a wall of framed degrees and commendations. One plaque read, Outstanding Legal Advocate for Women's Rights, which made Celeste's shoulders relax a little. At least she knew she was in the right place. Taking a seat across from Samantha, Celeste felt a pang of anxiety. Where should she even start? The entire meltdown of her marriage seemed too massive to reduce to words. Finally, she took a deep breath and began with the night Marcus had confronted her in the kitchen. She recounted, in a shaky voice, how he had calmly declared the marriage over, brandishing that prenuptial agreement like a final verdict. Samantha listened carefully, occasionally jotting down notes, her expression unreadable but compassionate. When Celeste finished, Samantha nodded once, as though she had heard a variation of this story many times before. Netoam. The prenuptial agreement is our starting point, she said, flipping through the pages Celeste had brought. But I assure you, we can examine every line to see if there are weaknesses or expiration clauses. There might be a chance this agreement isn't as ironclad as he believes, and even if it is, we can still explore other legal avenues such as unfair negotiation circumstances. Celeste felt a sliver of hope. Perhaps there was a legal route to fairness. He told me it was just a formality back then, she said, her hands wringing each other under the polished oak table. I was 23, no separate lawyer, nothing. I trusted him. Samantha narrowed her eyes. That alone is a critical point. If you weren't represented and didn't fully understand what you were signing, it might be invalid or at least contestable. Of course, she paused. We have to see how it's worded. Celeste explained how she had rummaged through her personal archives that morning, searching for a copy of the final draft. She'd only found an earlier version, but the final might be hidden in Marcus's study. Samantha seemed unfazed. We'll request formal discovery. If he fights us on that, it's a sign he's worried. Before Celeste left, Samantha added a soft but firm piece of advice. Protect your emotional well-being. Men like Marcus will try to rattle you. Document every conversation. And if you have any doubts about finances, gather proof. Celeste nodded, swallowing hard. She realized that from this moment on, her every move had to be strategic. No more naive trust. No more second-guessing her instincts. That evening, Celeste braced herself for another confrontation when Marcus returned from work. She was keenly aware of Samantha's words, document everything, so she set up her phone to record audio inconspicuously, just in case. Her heart thudded as the door opened, and in he walked, wearing his usual tailored suit, the top button of his dress shirt undone in a show of casual power. He seemed so at ease, strolling through the foyer like a king inspecting his domain. Celeste. He greeted her curtly, barely glancing up from his phone. We need to talk. She took a measured breath, fighting the urge to snap at him for his sheer callousness. Yes, we do. He led her into the living room, where the walls bore photos of their wedding day smiling faces, the horizon bright behind them. The incongruity nearly made her sick. Marcus sat down on the edge of the couch, setting aside a manila folder that bulged with legal papers. I met with my lawyer. He began in a business-like tone. She confirms that the prenuptial agreement stands. There's no point dragging this out. Celeste, you get the car, your clothes, anything that's strictly in your name. I'll be generous with a small cash settlement so we can speed things up. He delivered his lines smoothly, as though finalizing a corporate deal. Celeste felt her chest tighten. She remembered how many times he had used that same professional persuasion on potential investors. subduing them with half smiles and well-honed arguments. For the first time, she saw that side of him turned on her, and it made her skin crawl. "What about the house?" she asked, forcing her voice to remain level. "My name alone is on the deed," he stated, "so I plan to sell it soon. I can't afford the overhead if I'm also planning to move forward with expansions in the city." "You mean expansions for your real estate firm?" she clarified, hearing her voice teeter with anger. "You're doing well enough to own multiple properties, but somehow paying for this house is suddenly a burden." Marcus shrugged. Undeterred, "I'd rather free up the capital. It's just business." Celeste shot him a hard look, but he didn't flinch. Everything was just business to Marcus, even the marriage, apparently. She swallowed her bitterness. "We both invested time and energy into renovating this house," she said. "I oversaw every architectural decision. I found contractors, managed budgets, which I funded." He cut in, tapping the folder. "Anyway, I'm not here to debate your feelings. My lawyer says if you sign these papers, we can finalize quickly. You won't have to go through the embarrassment of depositions or a public trial." He opened the folder, took out a thick sheaf of documents, and slid them across the coffee table. Celeste recognized the top page settlement agreement. She willed her face not to betray her emotion. She had half a mind to fling the pages back at him. Instead, she gathered them in her lap with trembling hands. "Sign whenever you're ready," he said, standing. Then, with a dismissive nod, he headed upstairs. The moment he was out of sight, Celeste ended the recording on her phone, exhaling shakily. If this was how he wanted to handle their final chapter, so be it. She would not sign anything without a fight, because behind that crisp legal language lay the future she had worked for, and she refused to let him snatch it away so easily. The next morning, Celeste woke before dawn, her nerves still on edge. She needed clarity, or at least a space where she could think without Marcus looming over her. She remembered a small cafe tucked away near the historical district, a place she used to frequent during her college years. Back then, she'd often camp out for hours, reading about architectural marvels and dreaming of restoring old landmarks to their former glory. She arrived just after it opened, when the baristas still looked half asleep and the glass display of pastries was freshly stocked. She ordered a cappuccino and found a quiet corner by the window. Outside, the city was gradually stirring to life, buses rumbling by, pedestrians huddled in coats, the streetlights blinking off in the growing sunlight. Celeste popped open her laptop, determined to piece together as much financial data as she could. Over the years, Marcus had entrusted her with certain tasks, paying property taxes, reviewing insurance policies, though always under the guise of "you're more detail-oriented than I am." In truth, she suspected he just found these tasks tedious, but it meant she had a digital trail, emails confirming transactions, attachments with statements that might reveal more of his assets than he realized. She methodically sifted through an old email account, scanning subject lines for anything relevant: bank updates, investment summaries, letters from the accountants. She was cautious not to overreach. Some of the stuff she found was clearly password protected and beyond her immediate access. She compiled everything into a folder she labeled legal, copying relevant emails to a USB drive. Her heart pounded whenever she discovered large transfers or property deals she'd never heard Marcus discuss. She recognized addresses in different states, some referencing commercial buildings she vaguely remembered he'd mentioned in passing. The scope of his real estate portfolio seemed even bigger than she'd imagined. The more she uncovered, the more incensed she became. He had a fortune well beyond the comfortable lifestyle she'd been aware of, yet he intended to discard her with next to nothing. Partway through this digital excavation, her phone buzzed. Samantha was calling. Celeste quickly answered, glancing around as though someone might overhear. "I got your message," Samantha said, her tone brisk yet reassuring. "You did the right thing by gathering documents. Keep going, but don't do anything illegal, like hacking into private accounts." "I'm just collecting what he's emailed me in the past," Celeste clarified. "Good. I'm drafting requests for formal discovery. Also, I'd like you to look for the original copy of the prenup. Sometimes these documents have sunset clauses or modifications that people forget about. That might be a game changer." Celeste thought about the folder Marcus showed her, but it had looked final. "I'll see what I can find. He's locked up most important papers in his private study, but maybe I can sneak a look." "Be careful," Samantha warned. "And remember, do not sign anything he hands you, even if he threatens or tries to guilt trip you." They ended the call, and Celeste gazed into her cappuccino, her reflection wavering in the foam. A part of her still couldn't believe she was living this reality married for 12 years, only to be relegated to the role of an inconvenient tenant. But if Marcus wanted to treat their union like a business, she could steel herself for the battle. She would find any leverage she could, fight for recognition, and claim what was rightfully hers. That afternoon, Celeste mustered her courage to re-enter the house, half expecting Marcus to be there, ready for another round of cold, calculated instructions. But the place was empty, silent, the lights dim. She noticed the faint aroma of his cologne near the front door, as though he'd only just left. Her heartbeat quickened as she headed toward the study, the one room in the house where Marcus preferred absolute privacy. She could almost see the outline of his presence in the air. He spent countless evenings there, charting out business strategies, making late-night phone calls, or hosting hush-hush investor meetings. The door was locked. Of course. She jiggled the handle. No luck. She contemplated her options. It felt wrong to break in, but Samantha's words echoed in her mind. If we can find an overlooked clause, it changes everything. Taking a deep breath, she rushed upstairs to the bedroom closet. On the highest shelf, behind some old shoeboxes, was a small wooden container with their spare keys. She found one unmarked key that might fit the study door. Marcus had once stored it there for emergencies. Back downstairs, her hand trembled as she slid the key into the lock. It turned. Gently pushing the door open, she flicked on the light switch. The study revealed itself with an air of hushed grandeur, mahogany shelves lined with leather-bound books, a desk strewn with neatly stacked files, and a locked filing cabinet in the corner. She started at the desk, carefully rifling through the topmost folder. Mostly business proposals, nothing personal. She sifted further, discovering property deeds, lists of prospective clients, and a letter from a developer praising Marcus for his financial acumen. Her stomach churned. Here was proof of just how many deals he'd closed with her behind-the-scenes help. She recognized some of her own notes typed in the margins, suggestions she had made for refining these proposals. Pausing, she recalled the many nights she'd offered insights into marketing or hooking potential benefactors with philanthropic angles tactics that had apparently helped Marcus secure millions. Not that he ever publicly acknowledged her role. She pressed onward, opening drawers and scanning carefully, trying to avoid leaving any trace of her intrusion. Finally, she found a slim folder labeled Prenup Docs. Her heart leapt. Inside was the final prenuptial agreement, signed by both of them. She turned the pages, searching for anything unusual. Each paragraph was crammed with legal jargon, specifying that Celeste would have no claim to any of Marcus's assets in case of divorce, except her personal belongings. She was nearing the end when something caught her eye in the middle, a heading that read Clause 14, Duration of Prenuptial Terms. She read the lines twice, hardly daring to breathe. It detailed a sunset clause, stating that if their marriage lasted beyond a certain number of years, a full decade, various sections of the prenup would be rendered void. Specifically, any jointly acquired assets during the marriage would be subject to standard equitable distribution laws, and that mark had passed 2 years ago. A wave of shock mingled with relief washed over her. 2 years. That meant the bulk of Marcus's fortune, accumulated in the last decade, largely with her input, could be on the table for negotiation. She quickly copied the document using the scanner by the desk, saving digital copies to a flash drive as well. Then she placed the original back exactly where she found it, her mind already racing with the implications. Celeste phoned Samantha the moment she returned to the kitchen, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She relayed the essential details of Clause 14. Her lawyer's reaction was immediate and triumphant. That's a classic oversight. Marcus's current lawyer probably never thought to check for a sunset clause. This changes the entire game. They arranged a meeting at Samantha's office for the next day. Celeste could barely sleep that night, her thoughts spinning through possible outcomes. The revelation of that clause was a potent weapon, but she had to deploy it strategically. If Marcus discovered she knew, he might move to hide assets, shift money into offshore accounts, or funnel property into business partnerships not legally tied to him. The risk was enormous. At dawn, she confronted her reflection in the bathroom mirror, taking stock of the lines under her eyes. She realized she wasn't the same starry-eyed woman who had married Marcus. 12 years of both good times and suppressed frustrations had matured her, and now she had to harness that hard-earned resolve. She arrived at Samantha's office with the prenup copy safely tucked in a sealed envelope. Samantha welcomed her into a private conference room. The space was bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a stark contrast to the claustrophobic tension in Celeste's own home. First things first, Samantha began, gesturing for Celeste to hand over the document. She flipped to Clause 14, reading through the lines with the keen eye of a seasoned attorney. Well, well, she murmured. Marcus might be cursing his old lawyer when he finds out. Celeste fiddled with her pen, anxiety prickling her skin. So, what do we do now? Present it to him and demand a fair settlement. Samantha raised a hand as if to slow her down. Not immediately. We want to see how entrenched Marcus is in his assumption that the prenup is ironclad. Aisean. We'll let him continue to rely on it as his main defense. Once he formally reaffirms that in writing or in court, it strengthens our position to reveal Clause 14. It'll look like he either never read his own contract or chose to ignore it. Celeste swallowed hard. But what if he's already moving assets? That's a risk, Samantha admitted. But we'll be filing for an injunction to prevent rapid liquidation of marital property. Also, the fact that he's so confident he holds all the cards suggests he doesn't feel the need to hide anything yet. They spent the next hour mapping out a strategy. Samantha would issue a counter-proposal that challenged the fairness of the prenup on multiple grounds: lack of representation for Celeste, signing under time pressure, insufficient disclosure from Marcus. Their goal was to provoke a strong rebuttal from Marcus's legal team that doubled down on the prenup's validity. Once that was secured, they would reveal Clause 14, effectively dismantling his entire stance. By the time the meeting ended, Celeste felt a strange mixture of empowerment and fear. She had the upper hand, but also bore the weight of a carefully orchestrated plan. As she stepped onto the busy downtown sidewalk, passers-by bustled around her, oblivious to the battle she was waging. She inhaled, letting the urban energy galvanize her. For the first time in weeks, she sensed a path forward, one where she could fight not just for financial security, but for her own self-respect. That afternoon, Celeste sat at her dining table, now cluttered with documents labeled in sticky notes, and composed a personal letter to her mother, Irene, who lived on the other side of the country. She hadn't told her mother yet about the impending divorce. Their relationship was warm but somewhat distant. Irene had remarried and was happily settled into retirement, often traveling with her new husband. Celeste hesitated to burden her with the news. Still, she needed emotional support. After describing the circumstances in broad strokes, she wrote, "I'm not just fighting for money. Mom, I'm fighting for acknowledgement that I was a real partner in this marriage, that I contributed to his success." She sealed the envelope, wondering if sending a traditional letter was symbolic, a sign that she wanted to confide in a way that required reflection, not just a quick phone call. A chime from her phone interrupted her thoughts. It was a text message from Marcus. "We have to talk about your living situation. I have an interested buyer for the house." Her blood ran hot. He was already marketing the house, presumably behind her back. She typed a terse reply. "Noted. I'll be in touch through my lawyer." Then she turned off her notifications, not wanting to see any more messages that day. In the evening, after double-checking her locked bedroom door, she made a phone call to a realtor friend, someone outside Marcus's network. If the house was going on the market, Celeste wanted to know the details. The friend confirmed that a private listing was circulating among high-end property circles, describing the home's impressive renovations and prime location. Marcus was likely hoping for a quick sale. For a moment, Celeste felt sick. This was the home where she'd poured her energies designing the interior, coordinating contractors, turning it into a sanctuary. Now, she pictured potential buyers wandering through, judging the space purely on price per square foot. But she steeled herself. This was war, as Samantha had called it, and one had to remain strategic. That same night, Celeste pulled out a crisp notebook to document every conversation. She wrote down the text from Marcus, the date, and her response. Next to it, she jotted notes about the property's potential listing price, the fact that she had contributed to the down payment early in their marriage, and references to the numerous improvements for which she had been responsible. Before bed, she glanced around the bedroom, noticing the items that were distinctly hers, a set of antique books from her grandmother, a vintage vanity mirror she had rescued from a flea market, some architectural sketches pinned to a cork board. She made a mental note to safeguard these. If Marcus believed she would leave with just the clothes on her back, he was in for a surprise. Clause 14 was looming in the background, an unspoken promise of equity. She lay down in bed, listening to the hum of the house's air conditioning. In the hallway, the pictures of her and Marcus in happier times cast shadows under the dim lighting. Sleep wouldn't come easily, but she forced her eyes shut. Tomorrow would bring new rounds of negotiation. She needed her wits about her. The next day, Celeste walked into a sharply appointed mediation room with Samantha by her side. Opposite them sat Marcus and his lawyer, Jillian Dorsey, a formidable figure known for aggressively advocating high net worth clients. The walls of the room were sterile, lined with abstract art that hinted at neutrality but offered no comfort. A large rectangular table occupied most of the space, with water pitchers and glasses arranged like a banquet for an uneasy truce. Marcus barely acknowledged Celeste, flipping through his phone until Jillian nudged him to pay attention. The mediator, a measured older man named Mr. Roosevelt, started by explaining the process. "We're here to find common ground before resorting to a courtroom," he said, looking pointedly at both sides. "Of course," Jillian replied smoothly. "My client believes the prenuptial agreement is crystal clear, and we expect a swift resolution based on its terms." Samantha sat forward, her face calm but resolute. "We intend to challenge the prenup's validity. Ms. Warren Celeste felt a jolt at her maiden name, signed it without representation and under misleading assurances. A flicker of annoyance crossed Marcus's face. Celeste, you knew exactly what you were signing, he claimed, his tone dismissive, and don't try to spin it otherwise. Celeste swallowed, remembering Samantha's instructions to remain composed. I'm saying I was 23 and believed everything you told me. You said it was a formality, that everything we'd build together would be ours. The mediator nodded slowly, encouraging them to continue. Samantha laid out their initial counter-proposal, which demanded a significant slice of the marital assets, spousal support for a few years, and acknowledgement of Celeste's contributions to the properties. Jillian's expression turned steely. None of this is relevant if the prenup stands. She signed away rights to those assets. People sign many things they don't fully comprehend, Samantha said, sliding a folder toward the mediator. We have evidence that Ms. Warren was not adequately advised, that the information regarding Mr. Warren's then future acquisitions was incomplete, and that certain crucial pages might have been buried in legal jargon. Marcus let out an exaggerated sigh, finally locking eyes with Celeste. You're just dragging this out. Accept the settlement and move on. It's more money than you'd ever make on your own. Anyway, his words stung, but Celeste forced herself not to flinch. Samantha's posture went rigid. We reject the premise that Ms. Warren is incapable of earning a living. She delayed her own career to support your ambitions. Mr. Warren. That has financial value. Jillian cleared her throat, returning the focus to the mediator. We remain steadfast in our position. The prenuptial agreement is valid and governs this divorce. If Ms. Warren continues with these allegations, we'll proceed to court. The mediator proposed a short recess, sensing the tension. As the attorneys stepped outside to chat privately with their clients, Celeste and Marcus found themselves momentarily alone. He leaned over the table, lowering his voice. This is pointless. You and I both know you won't win. Just take my offer. Celeste met his gaze calmly. There was so much she wanted to scream at him for his betrayal, his arrogance, his disregard of their shared history, but she only said, I'm not walking away from 12 years of my life with nothing. We'll see, he said, flashing a mirthless smile. In that moment, Celeste felt the weight of Clause 14 burning in her pocket, an ace she couldn't wait to reveal, but only when the time was right. After the tense mediation session ended with no agreement, Celeste and Samantha slipped into a nearby cafe to debrief. A hush settled over their small table as they sipped hot tea, letting the day's confrontation sink in. Through the window, Celeste watched the flurry of office workers and lawyers passing by, all wrapped in their own hectic worlds. Samantha broke the silence first. Marcus looked rattled. Even if he tried to hide it, he thought you'd cave under pressure. Celeste exhaled slowly. He's good at intimidation. He used that skill for years in business. I guess it never occurred to me he'd use it on me. Samantha nodded in understanding. Now, Jillian's a wild card. She's combative, but that might work in our favor because she'll keep pushing the prenup as the ultimate solution. The more she insists it's valid, the better for us when we reveal it's effectively expired. They strategized for the next steps, filing formal discovery motions, requesting detailed records of all Marcus's real estate transactions, and quietly preparing to show that sunset clause in court if necessary. Celeste fiddled with a sugar packet, the tension still thrumming in her. She decided to confide something else to Samantha. He wants to sell the house. There's a potential buyer, apparently. Samantha arched a brow. We can file a motion to freeze any major property transactions until the divorce is settled. If he tries to offload assets before distribution, that'll look terrible in court. Celeste let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That's a relief. He acts like he can just snap his fingers and erase me from this house, from his business, from his life. Samantha's mouth formed a grim line. Men like him often underestimate the law. It might move slowly, but it can be a strong equalizer. We'll see to it. Feeling a surge of gratitude, Celeste squeezed her lawyer's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. I I never imagined I'd end up here, but I'm starting to feel not powerless." A faint smile touched Samantha's lips. "Remember that feeling? You'll need it." Later, back at the house, Celeste found a surprise waiting for her in the driveway, a shiny black SUV she didn't recognize. Her curiosity morphed into dread when she spotted who stepped out: Serafina, Marcus's younger sister. They had never been close. Serafina was tight-lipped and loyal to her brother, rarely expressing any sympathy for Celeste. "Celeste," Serafina called, striding up with a determined air. "I've been meaning to talk to you. Marcus said you're being unreasonable about the divorce." Celeste's eyebrows rose. She'd half expected some show of familial support. Instead, Serafina was here to echo Marcus's narrative. "Unreasonable how?" Celeste asked, crossing her arms. Serafina shrugged. "He says you're dragging this out, demanding more than what you're entitled to. He just wants a clean break. You know, I always liked you. But if you're just here for his money," the words stung. Celeste forced a tight smile. "I'm here for what I deserve after building a life with him for 12 years. I'm not just some gold digger who appeared yesterday." Serafina's expression wavered. "Look, I don't want to fight, but if this goes public, it could tarnish the family name, and that's not good for anyone." Celeste bit back a bitter laugh. "So it's my fault for not going quietly." A flicker of discomfort passed over Serafina's features. "I just wanted to offer some friendly advice. Marcus is going to fight hard. Sometimes it's better to settle and keep your dignity." Celeste felt her stomach churn. How many more people would try to guilt or bully her into silence? She inhaled, gathering her composure. "You can tell your brother that I'm not signing anything under duress. If he wants a fight, he'll get one." Serafina hesitated, then turned on her heel. As the SUV pulled away, Celeste stood in the driveway, the wind brushing her hair back. This was no longer just a legal battle, it was a personal war against everyone who saw her as disposable. The edges of her fear sharpened into resolve. She was done playing the supporting role. In the days that followed, Celeste observed Marcus stepping up his offensive. A series of emails arrived from Jillian's office, each more scathing than the last, accusing Celeste of sabotaging the house sale, bad-mouthing Marcus to potential clients, refusing reasonable terms, and so on. At first, these emails rattled her, stirring the old insecurities that Marcus had once nurtured, that she was overly emotional, that she couldn't handle conflict. But Samantha's counsel was clear. Each time Celeste received a pointed message, she forwarded it to her lawyer with a calm note. "Please see the attached communication. I'll await your guidance on how to respond." Celeste took to writing the date and time she read each email, ensuring a paper trail. She also began carefully documenting each instance where Marcus tried to corner her alone, continuing with his intimidation tactics. One evening, she found him in the living room when she came home, briefcase open, files spread across the coffee table. He glanced up with a look of forced civility. "We need to discuss the house showings. I'm scheduling them next week, and I don't want you lurking around." Celeste set her purse down, trying to steady her pulse. "This is still my residence, too. Marcus, I'd appreciate a heads up." He gestured at the documents. "I have 4 prospective buyers lined up. I'll text you times so you can clear out." "Maybe I don't want to clear out," she retorted, surprising even herself with her defiance. Marcus sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Don't make this unpleasant. The sooner we get a sale, the sooner we finalize everything, and the sooner you can move on." He couldn't even bring himself to say leave. Celeste studied his face, searching for any trace of the man she once loved. All she saw was calculation. She recalled the night they had closed on this house, how excited he'd been, how he'd picked her up and spun her around in the empty living room. Was that all an act? Or had he genuinely felt happy back then? She would never know. You do what you have to, she finally said. I'll talk to my lawyer. The tension in the room felt suffocating. Celeste retreated upstairs, her heart pounding. She took out her phone to record her immediate recollection of the exchange, capturing the time and details for Samantha. This had become her new normal, a cycle of confrontation, documentation, and quiet determination not to be steamrolled. In bed that night, she replayed the day's events in her mind. Marcus kept insisting on finalizing. The truth was, he had no idea that the prenuptial agreement he clung to was nullified by Clause 14. Celeste and Samantha's plan was to let him tie himself in legal knots, referencing a contract that no longer protected him. There was a certain satisfaction in imagining his reaction when he discovered the extent of her leverage. Yet, beneath that satisfaction, Celeste felt a tremor of grief. She had never wanted to be locked in a battle with the man she once believed was her soulmate, but if he continued to view her as an obstacle to be removed, she had no choice. She would face him head on, preparing for the day she'd place the truth directly in front of him. 1 week later, Celeste found herself stepping into a different battlefield, the hallways of the county courthouse. Samantha had filed motions to freeze major assets, including the house, pending the divorce. Marcus predictably contested. So here they were, waiting for a judge to hear the arguments. The corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale air. Groups of lawyers, clients, and court staff bustled around, their footsteps echoing off the marble floor. Celeste felt a stir of anxiety. She had never been in such a setting as a litigant. Samantha stood beside her, poised and unflappable, a thick binder clutched in one arm. After a tense wait, they entered a small courtroom. Marcus and Jillian were already seated at one table, while Celeste and Samantha took the opposing side. A clerk motioned for silence, and a gray-haired judge with a stern expression began the proceedings. Jillian spoke first, launching into a meticulously rehearsed argument about how Marcus needed the freedom to manage his assets for ongoing business deals, claiming that any freeze would cause irreparable harm to his ventures. Samantha countered with facts highlighting Celeste's interest in preserving marital property until the court could divide it equitably. She emphasized that the house had been thoroughly renovated through Celeste's efforts, and that if Marcus sold it prematurely, Celeste would lose access and leverage in the final settlement. As Celeste listened, she saw Marcus's jaw tighten each time Samantha referenced her contributions. He clearly loathed hearing someone speak of her as a legitimate partner in his acquisitions. That alone fueled Celeste's resolve. The judge, after weighing both sides, ruled in Celeste's favor. A temporary order barred Marcus from unilaterally selling or transferring ownership of the house until further notice. The look of outrage on Marcus's face would have been almost comical if the situation weren't so dire. Celeste imagined Jillian whispering urgent damage control strategies in his ear. When the judge exited, Celeste rose from her seat, exhaling in relief, but the moment she stepped into the hallway, Marcus was upon her, voice low and furious. "You're sabotaging me," he hissed, ignoring the presence of bystanders. "I have a multi-million-dollar deal on the line, and you're letting your pettiness burn it down." "Keep your voice down," Samantha said calmly, stepping between them. "We're still in a public courthouse." Marcus glared at her, then at Celeste, fists clenched. "You're not going to win," he said in a cold murmur. "You're just stalling the inevitable." Celeste caught a glimpse of Jillian approaching, looking mortified by Marcus's public outburst. "We should go," the lawyer urged him, tugging his sleeve. Without another word, Marcus stormed off down the hallway, Jillian trailing behind. Celeste stared at his retreating form, feeling both victorious and unsettled. This had been a minor victory, but it was also a glimpse of how ruthless Marcus would become as the stakes rose. Samantha gently touched Celeste's elbow. "He's cornered, and he knows it. This is exactly what we want him to feel under pressure. Certain he's in the right, oblivious to the flaw in his beloved prenup." They walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunlight. Celeste felt a spark of hope. Maybe the tide truly was turning. If so, she could only imagine the shockwaves once the ultimate revelation of Clause 14 hit. She silently steeled herself for the battles yet to come, convinced that each small victory was a step closer to reclaiming her rightful place in the life she had helped build. Celeste sensed a shift in the atmosphere of the house over the following days. Marcus began staying out later, sometimes not returning at all, which brought a perverse sense of relief, less tension within those walls. She used the solitude to continue her meticulous documentation. She cataloged every piece of furniture she had personally selected, every improvement done under her supervision. She snapped photos, made lists, and scanned receipts she'd kept in a shoebox in the closet. Late one evening, she was organizing digital files at the dining table when a soft knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find an unexpected visitor, Clarissa Gomez, one of Marcus's former colleagues. Celeste had always liked Clarissa, a savvy and compassionate woman who often sought Celeste's input during corporate events. But why was she here, alone? At this hour, Clarissa stepped in, looking anxious and hesitant. "I heard about what's happening," she said. "Marcus has been spinning his own version of events at the firm, and I wanted to check on you." For a moment, Celeste felt the warmth of genuine concern. She offered Clarissa a seat in the living room. The woman glanced around at the half-packed boxes and piles of paperwork. It must have looked like the prelude to a messy move-out. "I won't stay long," Clarissa assured, wringing her hands. "But you should know that Marcus has been quietly transferring some of his real estate holdings into separate shell companies. It's a rumor going around the office. I thought you might want to be aware." A cold knot formed in Celeste's stomach. She didn't have proof, but the possibility of him hiding assets was exactly what she feared. "Thank you," she said, voice shaking slightly. "Do you know any details?" Clarissa shook her head. "Just that he's been meeting privately with certain bankers and attorneys. He's telling people you're trying to take him for everything he's worth, so he needs to protect his interests." Celeste squeezed her eyes shut, taking in a sharp breath. She couldn't be surprised this was classic Marcus shield his fortune at all costs, paint himself as the victim, but it still stung. She got up and fetched a card with Samantha Porter's contact information. "Handing it to Clarissa," she said. "If you hear or see anything else, can you call her directly?" "Or me," Clarissa nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. "I will. I'm sorry it's come to this. You deserve better." When Clarissa left, Celeste dialed Samantha's number. It was well past office hours, but Samantha picked up, her voice tinged with concern. Celeste relayed Clarissa's warning. Samantha sounded grim. "We'll file additional motions for full disclosure of any new corporate structures. If he's funneling assets, we'll request forensic accountants." Celeste found herself tearing up when she ended the call. This was the man she had once believed she would grow old with now. He was moving heaven and earth to ensure she left with crumbs. But the tears hardened into resolve. She reminded herself of the secret Clause 14, the legal bullet that could blow his entire facade apart. Still, a part of her wished none of this had become so adversarial. She remembered a time when they had championed each other's dreams, and that memory ached like a deep bruise. Yet, she told herself, the Marcus from those days no longer existed. Now, she had to protect herself or be devoured by his lies. Another round of mediation came swiftly, scheduled 2 days after Clarissa's visit. Marcus, Jillian, Celeste, and Samantha found themselves across a polished table once more, the mediator patiently re-explaining the goal of reaching a compromise. Marcus glared at Celeste, clearly fuming about the court order freezing the house sale. Jillian wasted no time attacking Celeste's stance. This entire freeze is a punitive measure. My client has valid business interests that require liquidity. Ms. Warren's refusal to cooperate is draining his resources. Samantha, calm as ever, responded in measured tones. Ms. Warren has every right to ensure marital assets remain available for equitable distribution. If Mr. Warren is truly lacking funds, we can request a detailed financial statement of all his income streams. Marcus exhaled loudly, shooting Celeste a look that was half disbelief, half fury. So you just expect me to put every account under a microscope because you can't handle the fact that we're done. I expect transparency, Celeste replied, her chin lifting, and respect for the fact that we built this life together. Jillian's mouth twisted as though tasting something sour. You built nothing, Ms. Warren. My client's real estate empire was his initiative, his capital, his risk. You simply enjoyed the benefits. Celeste felt a flush creep up her neck, but before she could speak, Samantha intervened. That's an oversimplification. We have evidence of Ms. Warren's significant administrative, managerial, and networking contributions. We also have proof she invested her own inheritance in a property purchase. Our view is that Ms. Warren's role went beyond that of a mere beneficiary. Jillian snorted, sifting through her stack of documents. We'll argue in court that any minimal investments do not override the prenuptial agreement. The mediator glanced at Marcus. Mr. Warren, are you willing to consider any modifications to your initial settlement offer? Marcus's eyes narrowed. No, the prenup states she only leaves with personal effects. As a gesture of goodwill, I offered her a small sum. That's more than fair. There it was again, the unwavering reliance on the prenup. Celeste stole a quick look at Samantha, who gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. This was precisely the scenario they hoped for Marcus refusing to budge, fully confident that the prenup would shield him. Then we remain at an impasse, Samantha said, closing her folder. We'll continue to prepare for trial. The mediator sighed, admonishing both sides to reconsider, but Celeste could see it was futile. Marcus was fixated on his victory. Jillian was sharpening her knives, and neither realized a bomb waited in the text of Clause 14. After the session, outside the conference room, Marcus confronted Celeste once more. He leaned in, voice low. I see what you're doing, dragging my name through the mud, turning people like Clarissa against me. Clarissa came to me on her own. Celeste shot back, her heart pounding. I don't control what people think of you. He gave a derisive snort. I've poured my life into my company, and I won't let you tear it apart just because you're vindictive. Her eyes stung, but she refused to cry. I'm not vindictive. I'm protecting what's mine. He stepped away, shaking his head. You have no idea what you're up against. She met his glare head on. Neither do you. With that, he stalked away. Jillian barely keeping up. Celeste released a shaky breath, adrenaline coursing through her. Samantha appeared beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. He's pushing harder because he feels threatened. Stay strong. We're close to checkmate. Celeste nodded, inhaling deeply. Marcus might think he knew everything, but Clause 14 was still under wraps. She found herself almost looking forward to the day when he'd realized just how thoroughly he had underestimated her. Leaving the mediation center, Celeste felt emotionally spent but oddly fortified. She had stared down Marcus once more and hadn't blinked. Samantha excused herself to make a phone call, so Celeste decided to grab some air. She wandered around the block, lost in thought, until she spotted a small bookstore she used to love years ago. On a whim, she went inside. The scent of old pages and coffee immediately enveloped her, a comforting embrace. She roamed through the aisles, letting her eyes drift over titles. Memories of simpler times washed over her days when she would browse for hours, picking out volumes on architectural history, daydreaming about the projects she'd restore or the old theaters she'd save from demolition. Back then, Marcus would tease her for being a romantic, but in a gentle, affectionate way. She wondered if that was a lie too, or if he genuinely admired her passion at one time. After some minutes, she found herself in front of a shelf labeled Inspiration and Memoir. Her gaze fell on a book by a woman who had overcome a bitter corporate battle, rising to become a CEO. The tagline read, "Take back your power, take back your life." It resonated so profoundly that Celeste felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She picked up the book and turned it over, reading the back cover about resilience, forging a new path, and finding victory in unexpected places. She bought it without hesitation, along with a cappuccino from the tiny cafe corner in the store. As she settled into a worn armchair, she flipped through the first chapter. Lines jumped out at her about adversity being a catalyst for reinvention. She sipped her cappuccino, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. For all the stress, for all the heartbreak, maybe this fight was her path to reclaiming herself. Her phone buzzed. Samantha was calling. Celeste quickly answered. "Good news," Samantha said. "Marcus just filed an official motion doubling down on the prenup in court. He basically states it's the exclusive basis for how assets should be divided." Celeste's heart did a little flip. This was exactly the development they wanted. "So we can reveal Clause 14 soon. We'll do so at the emergency hearing, which I requested for early next week." Samantha explained. "Marcus likely thinks it's about the house freeze or additional financial disclosures, but we'll use it to present the full prenuptial agreement. With him on record insisting it's valid, the reveal of the sunset clause will undercut his entire case." A trembling mix of excitement and anxiety coursed through Celeste. Part of her dreaded the showdown, the stunned, furious expression on Marcus's face she could already imagine. Another part longed for the moment she could stand up in court and prove she wasn't the powerless pawn he believed her to be. "Thank you, Samantha. Thank." "Really?" Celeste whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Get some rest," Samantha encouraged. "Next week might be intense." Celeste ended the call and leaned back in the armchair, absorbing the quiet hum of the bookstore. The day of reckoning was near. She clutched the memoir in her hands like a talisman, determined to face whatever came next. If Marcus thought he could break her spirit before then, he was sorely mistaken. Clause 14 would soon become the very anchor that would keep her from drifting away with nothing, transforming this fight from a desperate last stand into a powerful resurgence of her long-lost identity. Celeste arrived at the courthouse for the emergency hearing with her pulse pounding in her ears. The corridor felt narrower than usual, its fluorescent lights and tiled floors amplifying every footstep. Samantha walked beside her, carrying a thick file that contained the prenuptial agreement, plus a copy marked up with highlights around Clause 14. Neither had publicly mentioned the clause yet. As planned, they were waiting for Marcus to proclaim one more time that the prenuptial agreement was rock solid. Inside the small courtroom, she spotted Marcus at his table with Jillian. He appeared confident as always, sharply dressed, hair combed back in a meticulous style. Yet Celeste sensed a tension in the set of his jaw, like he was bracing for another freeze order or a demand for more financial disclosures. The judge, a different one this time. A middle-aged woman named Judge Grayson entered with a curt greeting. She glanced at the docket, then fixed her gaze on Jillian. En bon passant. I understand you filed a motion stating the prenuptial agreement is the exclusive legal instrument governing asset division. Is that correct? Judge Grayson asked, her voice echoing in the quiet. Jillian rose. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Warren sees no reason for further debate. The agreement is clear and was signed willingly by Ms. Warren. Samantha stood in response, her posture composed. Your Honor, the defense has indeed cited the agreement repeatedly. We believe it's important that the court review the entirety of that document, not just the sections the defense claims are relevant. Marcus fidgeted, tapping his pen against the table. Celeste wondered if somewhere deep inside him, an alarm bell was going off. He had no idea just how thorough a review Samantha was about to push for. Judge Grayson motioned for Samantha to proceed. Very well. Let's see what you have. Samantha approached the bench with a binder. Your We respectfully direct Your Honor's attention to pages 12 through 14 of the final prenuptial agreement, particularly Section 14 duration of prenuptial terms. She paused, letting the significance hang in the air. This clause indicates a sunset provision. If the marriage exceeds 10 years, certain sections indeed, the majority of the agreement become null and void. A hush fell over the courtroom. Celeste noticed Jillian flipping hastily through her own copy, her face losing color. Marcus leaned closer, clearly reading as fast as he could. He looked up, a muscle in his jaw twitching. Samantha continued, voice unwavering. Mr. Warren and Ms. Warren have been married for 12 years. That means the key clauses limiting Ms. Warren's share of assets have expired 2 years ago. Therefore, the prenuptial agreement in question no longer restricts her rights. She is entitled to equitable distribution under state law. Marcus bolted upright. That's impossible. I never agreed to any. Jillian tried to hush him, but he pressed on. Your Honor, this must be a revised version. I wasn't aware of a sunset clause. It's a mistake or an alteration. Judge Grayson calmly flipped through the document. I see Mr. Warren's initials on every page, she said, eyes narrowing, including the page describing the sunset clause, and there is no sign of tampering. If this is indeed the final signed agreement, it's valid as presented. The tension in the room felt palpable, like a bolt of lightning ready to strike. In that loaded silence, Celeste saw the first hint of real panic in Marcus's eyes. The moment they had orchestrated so carefully was finally here. Everything he had counted on to keep her from her fair share had just crumbled under the simple, devastating weight of Clause 14. Judge Grayson peered over her glasses at Marcus, her tone stern. Mr. Warren, did you not review this document before relying on it? Marcus's neck flushed a vivid red. Jillian scrambled to salvage the situation. Your Honor, it appears that my client overlooked certain details. We maintain that even if a sunset clause exists, the spirit of the agreement was clear. Both parties intended to keep assets separate. Samantha cut her off with a polite but firm nod to the judge. Regardless of intent, the written clause is explicit. Ms. Warren's signature and Mr. Warren's initials confirm they both agreed to it. The marriage link surpasses the stated 10-year threshold, rendering most restrictions void. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but Jillian placed a hand on his arm, silently pleading with him not to speak out of turn again. He stared at Celeste with an expression that was part betrayal, part rage. It was as though he realized he'd been caught in his own trap, never once checking the comprehensive text of the very agreement he wielded so confidently. Judge Grayson rapped her gavel lightly to restore order. In light of this revelation, the court deems the bulk of the prenuptial agreement unenforceable. We will proceed with standard equitable distribution laws for property division. I suggest both parties use their time wisely to reach a fair settlement. We'll reconvene in 30 days for a status update. The gavel fell a final time, echoing like a seismic shift in Celeste's life. She exhaled the breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The door to a truly fair negotiation had just been thrown wide open. As soon as the judge exited, Marcus lurched to his feet, pinning Celeste with a furious glare. "You knew about this all along. How dare you let me?" Samantha stepped between them, her tone placid but unyielding. "That's enough, Ms. Warren is well within her rights to defend herself with the full text of a document your side presented." Jillian forcibly guided Marcus toward the exit, though he kept glancing back at Celeste with barely contained anger. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice low and threatening. Celeste caught his glare, swallowing the twinge of fear it provoked. She reminded herself that she had done nothing underhanded. She'd merely found a clause that was always there. Marcus's undoing was his own arrogance. Once he was gone, Samantha gently placed a hand on Celeste's shoulder. "Congratulations." Clause 14 has turned the tide. Celeste nodded, her entire body quivering with adrenaline. It was a triumphant moment, but also surreal. She had lived under Marcus's thumb for so long, assuming she had little say or power in her own destiny. Now, in one swift revelation, the entire dynamic shifted. If he wanted to keep pushing, he'd be fighting from a position of weakness. They walked out into the courthouse hallway, where Samantha began discussing the next steps: forensics, asset tracing, and a plan to negotiate from strength. But Celeste's mind buzzed too loudly to fully concentrate. She could only think that at last, she had secured a chance to walk away with what was rightfully hers. No longer was she bound by the lie that she contributed nothing. The law itself now demanded recognition of what she'd helped build. Minutes after Celeste and Samantha stepped outside the courthouse, sunlight bathed them in a sudden, disorienting brightness. Everything felt sharper, more alive. Celeste's heart still hammered from the confrontation, but she also felt an immense weight lifting from her shoulders. "Let's debrief at my office," Samantha suggested, her voice calm, professional. "We need to talk about next moves." Celeste nodded, trailing behind. Though her mind buzzed with excitement, she knew the battle wasn't fully over. Marcus would likely try new tactics, hidden assets, intimidation, anything he could muster. Clause 14 might have dismantled his main defense, but he still had his cunning. They entered Samantha's office building, taking the elevator to the firm's upper floor suite. The front desk staff greeted them with professional smiles, and Samantha led Celeste into a glass-walled conference room. Two other associates joined them, Ben and Alicia, both introduced as experts in financial forensics. "First, congratulations," Ben said, flipping open a laptop. "Sunset clauses are a game changer, but we need a complete asset profile so we can see what's on the table for equitable distribution." Samantha nodded to Celeste. "Marcus might start moving assets around if he hasn't already. We have to be thorough." Celeste recalled Clarissa's warning about shell companies. "I have a friend of Marcus's who hinted he was shifting properties into separate corporations. I don't have proof, just hearsay." Alicia took notes. "We'll subpoena any corporate filings we can find. The court can order him to disclose all holdings. If he lies, that's perjury." Samantha then outlined the bigger picture. With the prenup sidelined, the state formula for division applies. Real estate, stocks, business shares. Whatever Marcus acquired during the marriage is open to negotiation. However, We must prepare for him to claim certain assets as premarital or gifted. Celeste's mind spun. This was the next phase of the war, an intricate chess match over finances. Yet, a stirring of optimism kept her grounded. She might finally receive enough to secure her future, maybe even pursue her dream projects. The discussion went on for over an hour, delving into property law and timelines. By the end, Celeste felt both exhausted and invigorated, the adrenaline of victory slowly morphing into a new resolve. Outside the office, she noticed it was late afternoon. She declined Samantha's offer to arrange a car, choosing instead to walk a few blocks to clear her head. The city hummed with life, people rushing from offices, meeting for drinks, or heading home. Celeste, too, was in transition from the overshadowed wife to a woman staking her own claim. She paused at a traffic light, recalling the moment in court when Marcus had discovered Clause 14. The shock in his eyes was unforgettable. I said. A small, persistent voice inside her whispered that she might actually come out of this not just surviving, but thriving. She imagined stepping forward into a new chapter, owning her worth, continuing her professional passions in architecture and restoration. As the light turned green, she crossed the street, each footstep feeling more solid than before. This was a beginning, she told herself, not an end. The unraveling of the prenup was the key that unlocked a door she'd nearly forgotten existed. That night, Celeste returned to the house that was still technically half hers, though now the legal system would likely confirm it soon. The air felt different, as if the walls recognized her stronger footing. She walked through each room, noticing how the carefully chosen design elements evoked memories of their marriage's better days. But those days were gone, and she couldn't let nostalgia sabotage her newfound clarity. She expected Marcus might not appear, perhaps too enraged to face her. Yet, around 10 p.m., she heard the unmistakable sound of his car pulling into the driveway. Her nerves prickled with tension. Would he confront her, threaten her? She recalled Samantha's advice: keep documenting, keep calm, and never engage in heated arguments alone. Sure enough, moments later, Marcus entered, dropping his keys onto the marble console with a startling clang. He marched into the living room, where Celeste stood by the window. She met his eyes, preparing herself for whatever storm might erupt. "You blindsided me," he accused, voice wavering between anger and disbelief. "Was this your plan all along? Waiting until I was fully committed to the prenup, then springing some obscure clause?" Celeste inhaled slowly. She was determined not to shout or shrink away. That clause was always there. "Marcus, maybe you should have read the document you forced me to sign." He tensed, hands forming fists at his sides. "Don't twist this. I never forced you. You signed willingly. I was 23. I had no legal counsel. You said it was just a formality," she countered, amazed at her own poise. "But you know what? That doesn't even matter now. The courts recognize the clause. We're dividing everything fairly." He glared at her, breathing heavily. "You realize what you've done. If you keep demanding half of everything, you could ruin me. My business needs liquidity to grow." Celeste stiffened. "Ruin you? Don't be dramatic. I want what I'm entitled to, especially after spending years supporting you and helping you build your empire." Marcus scoffed, turning away. "You have no idea how business works. Taking half means I can't reinvest. It means lost deals, lost expansions. Are you really that spiteful?" She clenched her jaw, refusing to be baited. "All I want is security, what I earned. This isn't about spite. You're the one who tried to lock me out with a prenup. Don't blame me for discovering the truth." He spun around, eyes glinting. "You'll regret this." A chill went through her. She remembered Samantha's cautions men like Marcus could stoop to intimidation, but she refused to wilt. "Good night, Marcus," she said, stepping past him. Her tone was final, as though dismissing a guest who had overstayed. She locked herself in the bedroom, heart pounding. Through the door, she heard him cursing under his breath, then heard the slam of the front door as he left again. She exhaled, hands trembling, but a fierce sense of relief settled in. She'd stood her ground, refused to cower before his rage. In the silence that followed, she made a quick voice memo on her phone, recounting the exchange. Then she curled under the covers, exhaustion gripping her. The war continued, but for the first time, she believed she could fight and win without compromising who she was. Early the next morning, Celeste woke to the rhythmic sound of her phone vibrating on the bedside table. She squinted at the screen. It was an unknown number. Normally, she might ignore such a call, but something nudged her to pick up. "Hello, Ms. Warren." A female voice, somewhat tentative. "My name is Brittany. I work at Warren Realty Marcus's real estate office." Celeste's pulse jumped. "Yes, this is Celeste. What can I do for you?" Brittany let out a shaky breath. "I got your number from a mutual acquaintance. I overheard some conversations yesterday involving Marcus and Ms. Dorsey, his lawyer. They were discussing ways to shield or transfer certain assets before the equitable distribution is finalized." Celeste's chest tightened. The news wasn't surprising, yet hearing it confirmed felt like a punch. "Do you have any details?" Brittany hesitated. "They mentioned a shell corporation named Maddox Investments and some property titles being reassigned. I didn't catch everything, but I know it's related to some commercial units downtown." Celeste grabbed a notepad, scribbling furiously. "Thank you. Please, anything else you remember could be crucial." Brittany lowered her voice. "I'm not comfortable being too involved, but I feel bad watching him do this. I know how hard you worked for him. He's spinning the office narrative that you're trying to extort him, but I've seen the files he's hiding." Celeste thanked the woman for her bravery and ended the call with a swirl of emotions: gratitude, anger, and determination. Marcus was indeed scrambling to conceal his assets now that the prenup had fallen apart, but the law was on Celeste's side if she could prove these maneuvers. Immediately, she called Samantha, leaving a voicemail detailing what Brittany said. She then fired off an email summarizing the key points: Maddox Investments, downtown properties, and the probable timeline. By the time she finished, adrenaline had her fully awake. Despite the early hour, stepping into the hallway, she felt a newfound clarity. Marcus was in panic mode. He might be more ruthless now, but his fear also made him prone to mistakes. Celeste realized she had to be equally steadfast. No more illusions of a peaceful resolution. She decided to go for a brisk walk around the neighborhood, letting the cool morning air clear her head. Each house she passed seemed a reminder of the fragile nature of security. Was it truly a home if it could be sold out from under you? If its occupant was constantly threatened with displacement? She vowed never again to let someone else control her sense of belonging. When she returned, Samantha had texted her back. "We'll file an urgent discovery request for Maddox Investments and any other corporate entanglements. If Brittany is willing to sign an affidavit, that's even better." Celeste typed her reply with firm resolve. "I'll ask. Let's nail him on this." She set her phone aside, exhaling shakily. This might get uglier, but for the first time, Celeste understood that ugliness was sometimes necessary to dismantle the illusions and lies holding everything in place. By midday, Samantha had arranged a meeting with Brittany in a discreet coffee shop. Celeste was already seated at a corner table when the young woman arrived, looking jittery in a simple blouse and skirt. She glanced around nervously before sitting, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "Thanks for coming," Celeste said gently. I know this can't be easy for you. Brittany offered a tight smile. I just can't watch this happen. Marcus is telling everyone you're a gold digger, but I've seen how he's moved assets around. He's not fighting fair. Samantha, who had been quietly observing, introduced herself. Can you detail exactly what you heard? Brittany, and how you heard it? Brittany swallowed, then explained she was an administrative assistant with access to scheduling and some confidential memos. She'd overheard phone calls and seen unusual file transfers labeled urgent, referencing property holdings that were being retitled under Maddox Investments. She described how the staff was directed to remain silent, presumably to keep Celeste in the dark. Samantha took notes with cool efficiency, occasionally glancing up to gauge Brittany's level of comfort. After the explanation, the lawyer asked if Brittany would sign an affidavit attesting to these observations. Brittany hesitated. I'm afraid of losing my job if Marcus finds out. Celeste leaned forward, her voice soft. I won't pretend it's a small risk, but if we can show you as a credible witness, you'd be protected by certain whistleblower provisions. We might not even need you to testify in open court if we can subpoena the records directly. Brittany bit her lip, eyes darting between Celeste and Samantha. He can be vindictive. I've seen him fire people for less. Samantha gently placed a reassuring hand on Brittany's forearm. I understand, but I promise I'll keep your identity as confidential as possible. And if it comes to it, the court can mandate protective measures. After a long, tense moment, Brittany finally agreed. She signed a preliminary statement, with Samantha notarizing it through a mobile service the firm used for sensitive situations. As the pen left the paper, Celeste sensed the tremor of a major shift. They now had direct evidence of Marcus's potential fraud. Before leaving, Brittany confided one more detail she had seen an email from Jillian to Marcus, warning him that the asset transfer was risky. Celeste's eyes widened. If Jillian was cautioning him, that meant he knew he was skirting legality, possibly flirting with contempt of court. Once Brittany left, Samantha finished gathering her things. We have enough to request an immediate hearing, possibly for contempt or at least a freeze on any more transfers. Are you ready? Celeste nodded, though she felt a surge of apprehension. I've come this far. Might as well see it through? Samantha gave her a wry smile. Marcus underestimated you from the start. That was his biggest mistake. They parted ways outside, and Celeste lingered on the sidewalk, marveling at how her life had transformed into a whirlwind of legal battles, hidden documents, and secret meetings. A month ago, she had been paralyzed by the weight of Marcus's manipulation. Now, she was forging alliances, exposing his deceptions, and stepping out of his shadow. The thought both thrilled and unnerved her, as if she were learning to walk on a tightrope she'd never known existed. That same evening, Celeste returned home to find the living room lights ablaze, revealing Marcus pacing by the window with an almost frantic energy. He spun around when she shut the door. Did you think I wouldn't find out about your little meeting? He demanded, his voice crackling with barely contained rage. For a split second, Celeste froze. How had he discovered so quickly? Then she remembered that their city was a tight web of professional connections. Someone might have spotted Brittany meeting Celeste and Samantha, or perhaps Jillian had gleaned a rumor. Celeste steadied herself. I have no idea what you're talking about. She lied smoothly, not wanting to confirm or deny anything. Marcus took a few quick steps toward her, invading her personal space. He lowered his voice as though the walls might be bugged. I know you met with someone from my office, trying to dig up dirt on me. You're making a fool of yourself, refusing to back away. Celeste tilted her chin up. If you're referring to your questionable asset transfers, I didn't have to dig up anything. It's becoming an open secret at your firm. His eyes flashed with hatred. You're playing a dangerous game. I can and I will bury you under legal fees. Smear your name, whatever it takes. A tremor passed through her, but she clung to her composure. She'd expected this escalation. Then go ahead, she said softly. Smear me, try to break me, but the law is on my side now. He snarled, leaning in closer. For a moment, she feared he might do something physical, but he stopped just short of crossing that line. You're not the saint you pretend to be. He spat. Don't act like you haven't taken advantage of living in my house, driving a car I paid for, wearing clothes I bought. Celeste's temper flared. I contributed to those expenses, to your success, to everything we built. You're the one who tried to keep me with nothing. The venom in his stare was chilling, but she refused to look away. His lips parted, as if he wanted to hurl more accusations, but instead he whipped around and grabbed his keys from the side table. I can't be in the same house as you. Not tonight, he muttered. A moment later, the door slammed behind him. Celeste stood trembling in the echo of his departure, her heart hammering in her chest. This confrontation had been the most visceral yet, a tangible display of how deeply threatened he felt. Slowly, she sank onto the couch, pressing her palm against her thudding heart. She was proud she hadn't caved to fear, but the adrenaline left her shaky. A part of her longed for the days when conflict didn't loom over every hour, when she could assume she and Marcus had each other's best interests at heart. But that was gone now, burned by the flames of his greed and her need to defend herself. Reaching for her phone, she documented the incident. Then she took a long, deep breath. If she was going to see this battle through, she had to remain unbreakable, even when he threatened to scorch the earth around them both. The next morning brought a swirl of motion as Samantha filed for an emergency order to halt any further asset transfers by Marcus. The request included Brittany's affidavit, carefully edited to protect her identity unless absolutely necessary in court. Within hours, Celeste found herself once again in the courthouse corridors, waiting for a hearing to begin. This time, the atmosphere felt different, tenser, more hurried. A temporary judge had been assigned to handle overflow cases, so the hearing took place in a smaller, cramped chamber. Samantha guided Celeste to their table, while Marcus and Jillian sat on the other side, both wearing expressions that telegraphed annoyance and contempt. The judge, an older man with a grave demeanor, called the session to order. Samantha presented the affidavit and explained how there was reason to believe Marcus was trying to circumvent equitable distribution by funneling properties into newly formed entities. She argued that an immediate freeze was necessary to prevent irreparable harm to Celeste's share of the marital estate. Jillian rose in protest, calling the allegations unsubstantiated hearsay and accusing Celeste of orchestrating a witch hunt. She insisted that any corporate restructurings were routine business decisions, not an attempt to hide assets. Marcus stared at Celeste throughout Jillian's rebuttal, radiating anger. Celeste forced herself to meet his gaze, though it made her stomach churn. She sensed his unspoken warning. You're crossing lines you can't return from. But it was too late to turn back. After hearing both sides, the judge frowned at Marcus. Mr. Warren, I'm inclined to grant a temporary injunction on any further transfers. The allegations are serious enough that the court needs time to verify the truth. If it turns out you're not engaged in anything improper, you'll have lost nothing except a bit of time. Jillian tried once more to argue, but the judge silenced her with a raised hand. That's my decision. We'll set a date for an evidentiary hearing to determine if permanent injunctions or other measures are warranted. For now, Mr. Warren, do not move or encumber any assets without court permission. He brought the gavel down, and the hearing was over in minutes, a stark contrast to the seismic consequences. Celeste felt a surge of relief. Another victory. albeit a temporary one. She caught Marcus's scowl as Jillian gathered their papers, his fury palpable even from across the room. Outside, Samantha offered Celeste a quick congratulatory smile. We're building momentum. Step by step, we'll force transparency. He can't keep his empire hidden forever. Celeste nodded, though she felt a pang of guilt. She recognized this was not just about money, it was also about unmasking the deception that had replaced any genuine partnership in her marriage. She remembered the boyish ambition Marcus once exuded when they first met, how he'd promised her a life of adventure and mutual success. Now, she saw a man who would go to any length to protect what he believed was solely his. As they left the courthouse, Celeste paused on the front steps. The wind ruffled her hair, carrying away the staleness of the hearing room. She inhaled the fresh air, thinking, every small victory pulls me further from his control. The realization steadied her, reminding her of why she fought so hard for independence, for the years she'd invested, for the woman she was becoming, free from Marcus's shadow. In the weeks that followed, the legal skirmishes escalated. Samantha's team delved deeper into Marcus's finances, uncovering multiple shell corporations, side deals, and suspicious bank transactions. Each discovery led to new filings, new orders, and mounting pressure on Marcus to come clean. Jillian responded with countersuits, alleging Celeste had tried to sabotage business deals, but Samantha dismissed them as baseless. Amid this flurry of legal maneuvers, Celeste discovered a new rhythm in her personal life. She reconnected with old friends, visited favorite spots in the city, and even began exploring job opportunities in architectural consulting, an ambition she'd shelved for years to support Marcus. With Clause 14 validated, she felt a surge of confidence in her future. One sunny afternoon, she was at a local cafe, reviewing potential freelance gigs. When her phone buzzed, the screen showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered, bracing herself for yet another surprise. A warm, familiar voice greeted her. "Celeste, it's Irene, Mom." Celeste's breath caught. She had written a letter to her mother some time ago, but hadn't followed up. She'd been so engulfed in the legal battles, she'd almost forgotten that Irene might respond. "Hi, Mom," she managed, emotion churning inside her. "I got your letter," Irene said softly. "Why didn't you tell me sooner about the divorce?" Her mother's tone held a gentle reproach, but also genuine concern. Celeste swallowed, tears pricking her eyes. I was overwhelmed. I didn't want to worry you, especially since you're so far away." Irene exhaled quietly. Worry is part of a mother's job. "Dear, how are you holding up?" Celeste glanced around the cafe, recalling the nights she cried herself to sleep. "I'm okay. I think. Better than before. The prenup is invalid, and I have a strong legal team." A pause. "Do you need me to come out there? I can stay with you for a while if it helps." Celeste felt a wave of gratitude. She imagined having her mother's steady presence in the house, a comforting anchor amid the chaos. But she also knew Irene had her own life and commitments. "It means a lot that you'd offer. Let me see how things go over the next few weeks. If it all blows up, I'd love your help." Her mother's voice brightened. "All right, but promise me you won't face everything alone. People sometimes isolate themselves in hard times, but that's the last thing you need." After a few more minutes of reassuring talk, they ended the call. Celeste stared at her phone, a complicated mix of relief and longing churning in her chest. She had kept her mother at arm's length, partly out of pride, partly out of fear. Now, knowing she had family support felt like an emotional safety net. With renewed motivation, she resumed scanning job listings. Her dream had always been to restore historic buildings or consult for heritage projects. If she won a fair settlement, Maybe she could finally make that dream real. She thought of the old Celeste, overshadowed by Marcus's ambitions and overshadowed by her own insecurities. That Celeste was gone, or, at least, she was disappearing, bit by bit, replaced by someone stronger, more self-assured. 2 days later, Celeste found a letter from Marcus's lawyer in the mailbox when she returned home from a short errand. It bore the firm's embossed logo and felt heavier than usual, suggesting a slew of documents inside. She carried it to the kitchen table, bracing for more accusations or demands. Tearing the envelope open, she discovered a formal settlement offer. At first glance, it seemed more substantial than anything Marcus had proposed before. It acknowledged the voided prenuptial agreement and offered her a percentage of selected properties, plus a lump sum. The tone was polite, almost conciliatory, so unlike Marcus's recent tirades. Celeste immediately forwarded the documents to Samantha, who arranged a late afternoon phone consult. When the call came, Samantha sounded intrigued. "He's budging. Celeste, this is a real shift in strategy." "How good is this offer?" Celeste asked, scanning the bullet points again. "It's not terrible," Samantha allowed, carefully choosing her words. "It's more than Marcus originally wanted you to have, but still not close to full equitable distribution. He's basically hoping you'll bite out of fatigue or fear. We can certainly do better." Celeste's shoulders relaxed a fraction. At least it was progress, a sign that Marcus realized he could no longer dictate terms unilaterally. But her chest tightened, remembering the rancor in his eyes. Why the sudden attempt at a softer approach? He might be trying to avoid deeper scrutiny of his finances. Samantha continued. Or he's worried about Brittany's affidavit regarding his shell companies. Either way, he wants to settle out of court before we uncover more. Celeste tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. So we counter with something higher. Yes, we can outline a proposal that matches the real value of the assets accrued during the marriage. Gerson. We also include spousal support for a transitional period, given how much time you invested in his business at the expense of your own career. A memory flashed of late nights and early mornings drafting marketing plans, planning events, and rewriting investment pitches for Marcus. Celeste swallowed. "I'd like that," she murmured, feeling a swirl of vindication and sadness. Samantha's voice softened. "It's natural to feel conflicted, but remember, you're not asking for anything you didn't earn. The law is on your side." After they ended the call, Celeste took a long breath. She realized that acceptance of any settlement meant the marriage's final curtain was truly descending. There would be no more illusions, no ambiguous, "maybe we can fix this daydream." She glanced around the home she had poured her creativity into each lamp, each painting, each carefully chosen throw pillow. The weight of finality pressed on her chest like a phantom presence. Yet, she reminded herself that closure could be liberating. This settlement was just a stepping stone to the life she deserved, one free of a spouse who saw her as expendable. She gathered the settlement papers, organized them in a new folder labeled Potential Offers, and placed it beside the thick stack of evidence they had against Marcus. In that quiet kitchen, as the late afternoon sun cast soft shadows across the floor, Celeste allowed herself a small, tired smile. The fight wasn't over, but she could see the finish line in the distance. Maybe, just maybe, she was going to cross it standing tall. Later that evening, Celeste decided she needed a respite from the constant legal wrangling. She reached out to an old college friend, Madison, who lived nearby but whom Celeste had scarcely seen since her marriage to Marcus. They arranged to meet at a cozy wine bar that had live jazz music on Thursdays. Walking inside, Celeste felt a wave of nostalgia for the person she used to be, carefree, ambitious, passionate about architecture and art, unburdened by marital strife. Madison waved her over to a small table near the stage, and the two women embraced in a heartfelt hug. Madison had a way of immediately cutting through pleasantries. Sel, I've missed you. You disappeared into married life for a decade, she teased, though her eyes brimmed with genuine warmth. What's going on? Tell me everything. They ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir, and Celeste began to share the highlights and lowlights of her divorce battle. Madison listened intently, her expressions mirroring shock, anger, and encouragement in turn. When Celeste got to the part about Clause 14, Madison nearly spilled her glass, exclaiming, "He never read his own prenup. That's unbelievably poetic justice." Despite the heaviness of the topic, Celeste found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. Madison's incredulity, along with the atmospheric jazz melodies, helped lighten the weight on her chest. The two reminisced about their college days projects they'd collaborated on, nights spent discussing design philosophies, the dream to one day open a joint restoration firm. You were always the best researcher in the department, Madison said, swirling her wine. You helped me pass that dreaded Art Nouveau exam. Marcus was lucky to have you at his side for so long. Celeste stared into her glass. He doesn't see it that way. Sometimes I wonder if he ever truly respected my contributions or if he just humored me. Madison reached across the table to squeeze Celeste's hand. He can't erase your brilliance. And now that you're free, maybe we can revive our old dream. I'm still at the Historical Commission. You know, we're always looking for specialized consultants. Celeste's heart fluttered. It was the first time in ages that she allowed herself to envision a life beyond divorce proceedings, a life where she employed her academic background and creativity in meaningful projects, where she didn't have to subordinate her schedule to Marcus's demands. They chatted for hours, the music weaving through their conversation like a gentle undercurrent. Madison shared updates about ongoing restoration projects in the city, from old theaters to Victorian mansions, igniting Celeste's passion anew. By the time the bar closed, Celeste felt a renewed sense of possibility pulsing through her veins. Outside, the cool night air greeted them. Madison hugged Celeste again. "Let's not be strangers. I want to see you soar." "Okay." Celeste nodded, tears prickling at the corner of her eyes. She recalled Samantha's assurance that this divorce battle was not just about money, it was about stepping out of Marcus's shadow and reclaiming her own future. As she headed home, she felt a surge of inspiration. Win or lose, she was already making strides to become the person she was always meant to be. Just a few days later, Celeste's lawyer arranged a high-stakes negotiation meeting at a neutral conference venue, an upscale hotel downtown with private meeting rooms often used for corporate mediation. The plan was to discuss Marcus's settlement offer and present their counter. If Marcus was truly ready to compromise, they might finalize key terms today. Celeste dressed in a tailored suit that exuded quiet confidence. As she rode the elevator to the designated floor, she mentally rehearsed the points Samantha had outlined: a fair percentage of real estate, liquid assets, spousal support for a set period, and acknowledgement of her direct contributions to Marcus's business deals. The hotel's conference room overlooked the city skyline, large windows letting in abundant natural light. Celeste and Samantha arrived first, setting up their files. Marcus and Jillian appeared shortly after Marcus, looking tense, Jillian curt and businesslike. They sat opposite at a long mahogany table. After initial pleasantries were exchanged with forced smiles, Samantha took the lead. "We appreciate your revised offer, but we believe Ms. Warren deserves a more substantial share based on her documented involvement in property acquisitions and overall financial growth. We've prepared a counter-proposal." She slid a folder across the table. Jillian opened it, skimming the contents. while Marcus pretended indifference, though his rigid posture betrayed him. Jillian cleared her throat. You're asking for an additional 15% of the real estate portfolio, plus an extended timeline of spousal support. That's ambitious. Samantha leaned forward. Ambitious? Yes, also justified. We have evidence Celeste researched and negotiated several of the most lucrative deals that propelled Mr. Warren's firm forward. Marcus finally spoke, voice dripping with irritation. She didn't do the heavy lifting I did. Celeste interrupted him with surprising calm. I held dinner parties that landed you those investors, restructured your presentations, even found undervalued properties you later flipped for massive profits. Those are facts. Marcus, he scoffed, but Jillian held up a hand. Before we escalate, Mr. Warren, let's remember we're aiming for resolution. Clearly, Ms. Warren has contributed more than just moral support. Her words carried a grudging respect. Celeste felt a flicker of triumph finally. Someone from Marcus's camp was acknowledging her role, even if only strategically. They hashed out details for over 2 hours, the conversation seesawing between measured compromise and near flares of anger. Samantha remained unflappable, countering Jillian's every attempt to diminish Celeste's claims with precise references to receipts, emails, and prior statements. Eventually, they neared a tentative framework. Celeste would receive close to half the equity in several key properties, a scaled share of liquid assets, and a spousal support arrangement designed to help her rebuild her career over 3 years. Samantha insisted on clear penalties if Marcus tried to hide or transfer further assets. We'll need time to draft formal documents, Jillian said at last, rubbing her temples. But if both parties agree in principle, we can avoid a trial. Marcus remained silent, his expression set. Celeste found his reluctance almost pitiable. He'd spent months trying to reduce her to nothing. Now he had to concede she was owed much more. They adjourned with cautious optimism. Celeste felt equal parts drained and relieved. As Marcus gathered his things, he shot her a lingering glare, but she met his eyes squarely. She wasn't the timid partner in the shadows anymore. The deal on the table was proof. The next day, Celeste still hadn't heard whether Marcus would formally accept the negotiated terms. She paced their house waiting for a phone call that might confirm the deal. A swirl of emotions took hold: anticipation, dread, and a strange sadness. Finalizing the agreement meant concluding the marriage for good, and despite everything, part of her grieved the loss of what they once shared. By mid-afternoon, Samantha called. Jillian emailed me. Marcus says he needs time to think. Don't be alarmed, it's a standard move to see if you'll waver. My advice, stand firm. Keep going about your day. Easier said than done, Celeste thought wryly. She decided to channel her nervous energy into packing up items that belonged solely to her clothes. Books, personal mementos. If the settlement was confirmed, she'd likely move out soon. Marcus would probably insist on selling the house anyway. While sorting through a closet shelf, she stumbled on a dusty portfolio containing sketches from her graduate school days, architectural drawings of old Victorian homes, conceptual restorations of a decaying library. The lines were delicate yet precise, capturing a passion she'd nearly forgotten. She sat on the floor, flipping through each sheet, memories flooding back. She recalled how she'd dreamed of working in historic preservation, how Marcus had initially encouraged her until his business demands took precedence. Over time, she let her aspirations wilt, believing a supportive spouse should adapt. Looking at these sketches now, she felt a pang of regret, but also a jolt of inspiration. I can revive these dreams, she told herself. I'm free to do so now. A knock at the door made her jump. She tensed. Could Marcus be back unannounced? But when she answered, It was a delivery person holding a small envelope, Imonbone. After signing, Celeste opened it to find a business card from the local Historical Preservation Society, along with a handwritten note. We've heard from Madison that you might be open to consulting. Could you join us for a preliminary discussion next Thursday? Celeste's heart soared. She immediately texted Madison a thank you. It felt surreal that amid the turmoil of her divorce, opportunities were emerging to rekindle her ambitions. Maybe once she resolved this final chapter with Marcus, she could dedicate herself to the cause she loved, restoring and preserving architectural treasures. Glancing around the half-packed room, she realized how symbolic it was stepping away from a life overshadowed by someone else's ambitions, stepping toward the life she'd once envisioned for herself. Yes, she still had to secure the final settlement, but the horizon was brightening. That evening, she treated herself to a quiet dinner, a glass of wine, and a comforting bowl of pasta. She sat in the dimly lit kitchen, mentally composing a future that no longer revolved around Marcus. Though the outcome of the negotiations was uncertain, the seeds of her next chapter had been planted. She clung to the promise that new growth would follow. 3 more days passed before Marcus delivered his answer. The tension had been building like a storm cloud, and Celeste checked her messages obsessively. When Samantha's caller ID finally lit up her phone, Celeste's stomach flipped. "He's agreed," Samantha said, audible relief in her voice. "He'll accept the settlement terms as negotiated. Jillian sent confirmation this morning." Celeste let out a long, tremulous exhale, a complex mix of joy, relief, and sorrow washing over her. It felt like a giant wave crashing ashore she had braced for impact, and now she could finally breathe. "So, this is it." Samantha paused. "We still need to sign the official documents and file them with the court. But yes, effectively. Once everything is formalized, you'll receive your share of assets and spousal support. The house will likely be sold, and proceeds divided as agreed." Nodding, Celeste stared out the window. The sunlit morning seemed brighter than usual, as if reflecting her newfound liberation. But the mention of the house sale pricked her heart. She'd poured so much of herself into every corner. Letting it go felt painful, but also inevitable. A fresh start required leaving certain things behind. The next day, Celeste and Samantha met Jillian and Marcus at a neutral law office to finalize the paperwork. The atmosphere was charged but less combative. Everyone knew the broad strokes of the deal. Jillian went through each clause, occasionally asking for clarifications or minor revisions. Marcus, however, sat stiffly, signing with terse efficiency, not once meeting Celeste's gaze. When it was Celeste's turn, her hands trembled slightly. Each signature signified a stepping stone out of the marriage. The last page felt the heaviest final dissolution and division of assets. She exhaled and penned her name. The room felt charged with a quiet finality as she set the pen down. Jillian gathered the documents, offering a brisk congratulations that sounded more obligatory than sincere. Marcus stood, still avoiding Celeste's eyes. He muttered something to Jillian and left the room without a word of farewell. Celeste watched him go, her heart strangely hollow. For 12 years, they had shared a life. Now, it ended in a few cursory strokes of ink. Samantha gently touched her shoulder. "Are you okay?" She swallowed hard. "I will be," she said, voice wavering. They left the building together, stepping onto the bustling sidewalk. Celeste squinted in the afternoon light. Trying to let the significance sink in, she had fought for her rights, and she'd won a fair settlement far more than Marcus ever intended her to have. And yet, as she walked, she felt tears threatening to escape. It wasn't regret, precisely, but a deep sadness for the love that once was. They parted ways on the corner. Samantha promising to handle the filing. Celeste turned into a nearby park, needing a quiet place to process. She found a bench under an ancient oak tree. For a long time, she just sat there, absorbing the swirl of relief and sorrow. But amid the uncertainty, she recognized a growing sense of strength. She might have lost the marriage, but she'd reclaimed herself. In the weeks that followed, Celeste navigated the practical aftermath of her divorce. The house quickly went on the market, and she made peace with the idea that someone new would inhabit the spaces she had designed. While sorting through the last of her belongings, she chose carefully which items to keep and which to leave behind, like shedding old skin to make room for the new. The settlement funds allowed her to secure a modest but stylish apartment in a vibrant part of town. She moved in with a mixture of nerves and excitement. For the first time, she was living in a space entirely her own, free from anyone else's preferences or judgments. She hung her favorite artwork on the walls, carefully arranged her antique books in a sunlit corner, and placed a large drafting table near a window overlooking the street. It felt like the seeds of the life she'd once envisioned: creative, independent, self-directed. Around the same time, she officially began consulting for the Historical Preservation Society. Madison introduced her to a small team passionate about saving old theaters, restoring historical buildings, and educating the public about architectural heritage. Celeste's eyes shone as she pored over blueprints, discussing how to preserve the ornate ceiling of a 1920s cinema. The work was challenging, but deeply fulfilling. One late afternoon, after a productive day on site, Celeste walked through the city's historic district, marveling at the grand facades of buildings that had stood for generations. Her phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. All final paperwork processed. The divorce is officially complete. Celeste stared at the screen, her heart clenching and then expanding all at once. She paused by a beautifully restored fountain, letting the water's gentle cascade soothe her. This was the official end of a chapter. No more waiting, no more negotiations. She was free. As she leaned against the fountain's cool stone, a quiet determination ignited within her. The marriage had ended, but her life was beginning anew. She felt no need for vengeance or lingering anger. Yes, Marcus had tried to strip her of everything, and yes, it had been painful, even cruel. But in the process, she discovered a well of resilience and found the clarity to resurrect her long-buried dreams. She typed a quick note back to Samantha. "Thank you for everything. I'm ready to move forward." Then she slipped her phone away, choosing to simply exist in the moment, the glow of late-day sun reflecting off the fountain's ripples. For a while, she just listened to the city's hum: cars, footsteps, distant laughter. Life moved forward, constant and unstoppable, and Celeste Warren would move with it, no longer shackled by a marriage that devalued her, no longer defined by someone else's ambitions. She was stepping into her own story, drafting it line by line like the architectural plans she once dreamed of creating. She dipped her hand into the fountain's cool water, letting droplets run through her fingers. The future beckoned, wide open, a testament to her hard-won liberation. This, she realized, was her moment of return to the person she was meant to be: a woman of strength, creativity, and unshakable resolve. In the end, victory came quietly, not with fireworks or fanfare, but with the quiet dignity of a truth finally spoken. She had entered this battle wounded, stripped of illusions and security, forced to confront the bitter price of misplaced trust. But through the turmoil, she rediscovered herself stronger, wiser, and unbreakably determined. She thought back to all she'd lost: the years invested, the dreams deferred, the innocence surrendered to deception. But those losses had forged her into someone she barely recognized. At first, a woman unafraid to claim what she rightfully earned, to defend her worth in a world that often overlooked her contributions. Now, standing alone in the quiet aftermath, she felt something deeper than triumph, a profound sense of freedom. The scars remained, reminders of battles fought and lessons learned, but the horizon ahead was hers to shape. Perhaps the true cost of betrayal isn't what we lose to others, but what we allow ourselves to lose within. And maybe, just maybe, redemption begins the moment we reclaim that part of us we almost forgot existed. What would you have done had the power finally shifted into your hands